Hi, welcome to today's episode of Book Chat. I'm Allison. I'm an advisory librarian here at Skokie Public Library. Today, Becca and I are joined by Angela and Lee, and we are so excited that they're here. I'm going to start us off today with You Never Forget Your First by Alexis Coe. It may sound like a romance, but it's actually a biography of George Washington. Now you may be thinking, really, another biography of George Washington? Is that even necessary? But trust me, it is, and here's why. You Never Forget Your First tells you what the other books about our first president don't. Other biographies, typically written by who Coe calls the thigh men of dad history, that is, men who write history about men for men, tend to glorify his masculinity but soften the parts of Washington's life that don't fit the narrative of the benevolent, wise, and all-around good guy. For example, most historians tend to gloss over the fact that Washington was a slaveholder. In fact, he owned enslaved people from the age of 11 until his death, and even put a lot of effort towards finding loopholes to avoid freeing them during his time in Philadelphia. Coe presents her research with cheek and wit while still clearly presenting the facts and busting myths. Also that title, You Never Forget Your First. It's just so good. All right, with that, I will send this over to Lee.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lee. I am an information specialist here at Skokie Public Library. The book that I'm going to talk to you all about is called On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden. And so basically this graphic novel, it's a graphic novel, started out as a webcomic series in 2016, and then later it was adapted into a graphic novel. And I think typically it's sort of marketed as a YA book, but I actually really love it. It's one of my favorite books, so I like to recommend it to all age groups. The plot of the graphic novel sort of revolves around this crew of misfits, and so they're sort of traveling around space, and their job is to restore like crumbling buildings. So they go to these different sites, and their job is a little bit dangerous, you know, because they're just sort of, they're not sure of the structural integrity of the workplaces that they are going to. And the plot sort of follows the main protagonist, whose name is Mia. And so she's a teenager, so I think maybe that's why it's marketed as YA. But she is the newest person to join the crew, and she used to go to a all-girls boarding school before she joined this crew. And this is where she meets a character named Grace, and she sort of falls for this Grace character. And Grace sort of leaves the boarding school under like mysterious circumstances, and so the plot is really revolves around going back into Mia's time at the boarding school, and then also going to the present. So there's a lot of flashbacks and things like that going on in the story. And it also sort of delves into the other characters that are in the crew, so it gives the reader a lot of the background between how the characters interact and also what their previous experiences are. I would say that the plot is really fast-paced and it's really engaging. So I think the artwork also contributes to that, because I think that Walden's illustration style, it's really dynamic, and there's a lot of intricate details, especially like in the background, but I think that actually drives the narrative forward. So, and she also uses color to sort of indicate time and also place, so that's sort of an interesting technique that she uses. And I think this novel is sort of like hits on all the things that I really love about a book. So for example, it's coming of age, there's romance in it, it's really great sci-fi, it's really visually striking, I would say, and there's a lot of LGBT representation. So I think this is sort of the first book that I've read, first piece of literature that had a sort of like explicit representation of a non-binary character. So and they mention it in the narrative as well. So I think that's really cool. And also it's been mentioned that there's like no men in this book. All of the characters are women or non-binary. So it's really interesting to see someone sort of imagine the future where you know, it's just women and women have the power. So I think that that part of it is really cool as well. Um, and overall, I think the narrative of the story is really romantic. It's really moving, but at the same time, sort of tragic too. So I come back to this book again and again because I think it's such a um, it's such a like a sweet and moving story. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Angela.
Hey, I'm Angela. I'm the Youth and Family Program Coordinator at Skokie Public Library. The book I'm going to be talking about today is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It is in our adult fiction collection and available in all formats. It is sort of a sprawling love story, but not a romance. It starts off with the two main characters, Obinze and Ifemelu, who they meet when they're teenagers, when they're living in Nigeria, and they sort of take different paths that were steered in large part by 9/11. Ifemelu moves to the United States and she goes to college, and Obinze isn't able to come over because of some visa difficulties related to 9/11. So he ends up going to England and being an undocumented immigrant, living and sort of working in the system. Ifemelu experiences being a documented immigrant in the United States. One of the things I like about Ifemelu's story is that it sort of covers the Black immigrant experience, which is something that we don't hear a lot about. Later on in life, Ifemelu and Obinze reconnect back in Nigeria. This story is sprawling. It is about social commentary. It is about Black experience, Black immigrant experience. It's about love. Overall, it's an effort. It has a lot of really good food in it. So if you like recipes or learning about food in different places, this might really be a great book for you. I encourage you to pick it up if you want something that you want to just dive into and not put down. It really is awesome. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becca.
My word, thank you, Angela. That has been on my to-read list for a really long time, and I think your description just like bumped it up a lot of notches. Yeah, that sounds so great. Thank you for sharing. So I am going to go with the kind of October spooky kind of vibe. And today I'm going to talk about Dreadnation by Justina, Ireland. It's a zombie novel, but not quite in the way that you might normally think about a zombie novel. It is historical supernatural, which doesn't happen, I don't think, a lot, or at least doesn't happen well a lot. It goes with the concept of what if the Civil War didn't end because the war was over? What if it ended because the soldiers started rising up after they had been killed as zombies? Or in this book, they call them shamblers, which I think is just a great way to describe the zombies, kind of the way that they exist in this universe. The writing is fantastic. Justina, Ireland talks a lot about how she wrote this book as kind of a response to books like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, because her thought was, if zombies rose up during this kind of Civil War to Victorian era, it wouldn't be the rich white girls that went out to slay them. It would be Black girls, it would be Indigenous girls, and they would be the ones who would have to go to these fighting academies to learn how to slay zombies. So the world building is just really cool. It's our history, but not. One thing that I thought was a really cool detail that stood out to me was there are no horse-drawn carriages because the horses were one of the first things that the zombies went to. So just kind of imagining an alternate history. It's really compelling. It goes in a totally different direction that I thought it was going to go. It's the first book in a series. So if you want to like live in the world of zombies, the second book is out as well. You can do that in October, and what a great time for that. It's available via Overdrive Libby and Hoopla. I know that we have print copies of it as well. So however the mood strikes you. The audiobook of it is fantastic. So if you are an audiobook listener, I would recommend that as well. So that is Dreadnation by Justina Ireland. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you especially to Angela and Lee. We are so glad that you were able to spend some time and talk about books with us today. Allyson, of course, as always. You will find links to all of the books that we discussed today below in below the video in the YouTubes. If you have any questions about downloading any of these books or any of the books that we have available through Skokie Public Library, please send an email to us at matchmanagers@skokielibrary.info. Thank you so much for joining us today. We miss you. We look forward to talking books in person soon, but until then, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.